I'm going to kick it off since it's 1:30. My name is Kelly O'Brien, and I am the Executive Director of both the Alliance for Regional Development and the Chicago Central Area Committee. I am very pleased to have a thought leader from Chicago and somebody that I have worked with since I took over the executive director role of both organizations the same year that Mike Edwards took over the head of the Chicago Loop Alliance. So I appreciate everybody joining us today. Please know that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I encourage you to submit questions, and I will do my best to make sure to relay those to Mike Edwards. So if you're not familiar with Mike from the Chicago Loop Alliance, as I mentioned, he did start in 2012 as the president and CEO. He is an economic development expert. Maybe not a Zoom expert, but certainly an economic development expert. And he has been overseeing the organization's vision of creating, promoting, and managing a high-performing urban experience that will attract people and investment to the Loop. Mike is a founding member of the Global Business Districts Innovation Club based in Paris, France. Seems like a great place, Mike, to form an organization. And he has previously served 2 terms on the board of the International Downtown Association. So Mike, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Great. Just to be clear, you can see me?
I can see you.
Great. Okay. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here with you and members of the CCAC. I am pleased to represent the Chicago Loop Alliance. And what I'd like to do is just sort of talk a little bit about what we've done in reaction to COVID-19 and some of the social justice issues that are associated with all of that. So as you said, I've been here since 2012. We operate the SSA on State Street and the membership organization within the Loop. Our operating budget is about $4 million. And we have reduced our staff like most people have, and we're now currently at 7 staff people.
Okay. And Mike, before we really get started, just is there anything else about your background that maybe you'd want to share, or can you share with the audience? Are everybody in your family all doing well?
Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Kelly, very much. Yes, everybody in our family is great. Our kids are in college. They're in other places for the most part. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Okay, sure.
So when COVID started in March of this year, of course, the whole world shifted for all of us. And I just wanted to let you know that, like many groups, we were sort of at a loss of what to do. So we put a framework in place that I think is still holding, but there's an important difference. So March through April, we were in a crisis period. And in May through August, a crisis period meaning basically we canceled everything. Pre-recovery period, May through August, we moved everything to a virtual format and continued to do work and tried to figure out what was important and what was not important. Our recovery was predicted to start in September through December, with the transformation of the Loop sometime in the first part of the year. You know, for your people on the line, I think we all have figured out that it's not going to happen in January, and it may not happen in 2021. But for planning purposes going into next year, we're going to assume that the Loop is going to be somewhat more like itself by midsummer, maybe August of 2021. So obviously the world has changed with COVID and some of the social unrest that has been caused in part by COVID. And so what has been our response? The Chicago Loop Alliance provides a variety of services that make the Loop a better place. And so our core services have become much more important and more essential. So as we used to pan and broom and remove graffiti, we're now cleaning and disinfecting surfaces because we want to improve the perception that the Loop and State Street specifically is a healthy and wonderful place. We moved to a more mobile and flexible program with detergents and with disinfectants that can keep the Loop clean and all of those surfaces that people may touch and come in contact with. We have major cleaning initiatives in the evening and overnights. We do this more than we did before, and we're now using a special COVID disinfectant and cleaning all of the surface areas up and down State Street. We've always done pressure washing, but we're just much more intentional about it this time. So for downtowns like ours, it used to be that we need to be clean, safe, and fun. And now we need to be clean, safe, and fun and perceived as very healthy, as a healthy place for people to come and where they can get their services and have some fun, but in a healthy, safe environment. We also played host to the protests that occurred because of the killing of George Floyd. And of course, in the last parts of May, these all started off one Saturday, very calm, with a lot of people, pretty agitated about what was happening. And over time, or over that evening, I was down here for the whole thing. They turned in from peaceful protests to violence, destroying as many as 50 businesses up and down State Street and beyond. And it was actually a very surreal kind of thing that was happening in the Loop. I just couldn't believe actually what was happening. But what the Chicago Loop Alliance understood is that it's a reaction to something very important. So when we came out of that, we were very intentional on getting involved with and being very supportive of the initiatives of the original protest, certainly not the violence. So in fact, we aggressively embraced the protest cause, distributing posters like you see here to show people that the business community kind of gets it on State Street and in the Loop. We also did some supporting of the community outpouring of both grief and hope through over 25 painted boards up and down State Street and throughout the Loop. We wanted to align with these changes that the community is demanding and internalize them to our own community. So we began processes right after that of looking internal to ourselves and held meetings, mostly virtual, some in person, where we actually sat down and talked about what is it that we can do. Here's an interesting thing that came out of all of that, is Black people do not feel welcome on State Street. That surprised the heck out of us. Like, what does that mean exactly? I don't have an answer for you, but I think basically people just don't feel welcome when they come into stores. It's a lot of security. There's certainly a lot more security now than there was before. And so that's something we want to affect both internally to our own organization. How can we be a better non-racist organization? And then what we learn, we want to impart to our stakeholders up and down State Street. So those are two evolving issues. They keep changing. We keep having strategies, but all of it is a kind of something that continues to be in motion. Because of COVID largely, and because of some of the violence associated with the protests, communications have become a huge part of what we do. And so we now communicate with our stakeholders through our weekly messages that you can see as a sample here. We'd love to get you on our email list, any of you that would like to be on that, to give people an update on what the organization is doing to try to combat some of these challenges before us. We do advisories consistently in connection with what the mayor's doing, the mayor's office, and some of our partner organizations to give people information that they need in order to both protect their business and take advantage of opportunities that come along. We also communicate with our stakeholders, with our businesses, to promote businesses and what they're doing so that people will come down and continue to enjoy the Loop. This has been a huge struggle, as all of you are aware. But what we're doing is trying to promote a safe downtown, invite people to places that we know are safe, like some of the outdoor amenities like the Riverwalk and to Grant Park, and with the opening of the lakefront, certainly to the lakefront. But we also have a lot of other businesses. So early on, we began a program to help them purchase signs that were clear and that worked in order to attract people to businesses that are open. The whole move to takeout and delivery was a new thing, and anything that we could do to help promote businesses, we were funding and helping to fund those things. We also wanted to keep the destination, the Loop, beautiful, so we did lots of landscaping. We do this every year. We just continued to do that. Adding normalcy and people seeing what they sort of expect to see, we think is an important part of getting people back and comfortable with the Loop. We also promoted other activities in the Loop. So we have public spaces. Again, outdoors seem to be the safest place. So while I've always done the gateway that you see here in the picture, we added umbrellas, we added tables, we added a level of cleanliness that maybe wasn't there before. We continued to communicate with our businesses to let them know what was going on. And then around July, we began to think, given all of the social unrest, we really need to begin to invite everybody to come to the loop, not just workers and not just shoppers. And so we began a campaign called Everyone's Neighborhood, the loop, the idea of getting people back into the loop. And in order to do that, the idea was to encourage them to come and experience a neighborhood that belongs to everybody. We wanted to welcome them back. We wanted to promote the loop as a clean, safe and healthy place. And we want to promote the businesses and the attraction amongst a number of other objectives. So we have signs and we have banners up and down State Street. Those are still there today. And I think it's worked pretty well to make people realize that the loop continues to be a place for everyone. Finally, one of the other things that we did, and we have found a lot of power in this, is the notion of data. And so we have now begun to collect really two kinds of data. The first is, and I'll give you some statistics, ped counts, or weekly ped counts, parking volumes, employee occupancy within buildings. So not tenancy, but how many people are actually in the Willis Tower. 15,000 people could be in the Willis Tower. 75 people are in the Willis Tower. And then hotel occupancy. So just a couple numbers associated with that in terms of the state of the loop. So our pedestrian counts are 35% of what they were the same week last year up and down State Street. They're a little bit better on Michigan Avenue up by the bridges. They're at about 56%. And parking is at 40 to 55%. So people are coming back downtown. They're probably working, but they're taking their car more than they are transit, because the CTA is operating at 22% capacity, the trains, not the buses, just the trains. Hotels are at about 20 to 23% occupancy. And the actual numbers of people in offices are horrible. They're between 10 and 17%, sort of depends on the building. So, as we move forward, what we're hoping to do is with this data, begin to tell a story. It's an agonizingly slow story, but a story that we think will demonstrate over time the reoccupation, the reactivation of the loop going forward. Of course, we need partnerships, and we're glad to have the one with your organization. We look forward to working with you in the year ahead.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's a lot of information. And I think that, your three major themes in terms of how the CLA is assisting with COVID and keeping the city clean is very helpful. Obviously, the information that you've garnered from citizens and residents and social justice issues that have surfaced is extremely important. And having a campaign to bring the loop back is certainly a high priority for everyone. So thank you for that information. I do encourage our audience to submit questions. And Mike, I'd like to read the first one.
Sure.
Mr. Edwards indicated that he anticipates that things will come back to somewhat normal in the summer of 2021. Is there any major businesses moving out of the loop for good? Does he expect potential permanent loss of business as a result of COVID-19, or is it too early to tell?
Well, I think it's a little too early to tell. We have heard rumors of some companies deciding not to reopen, not because they're going out of business, but because they're going to office in a different way. The chatter that I hear, and I don't have any details on this, is that offices will probably come back to about 70% of employee occupancy. So the buildings will be full, people will just be more spread out. So if the last 20 years we've been shrinking from 500 square feet per employee to 150 square feet, I think that that's just going to expand. Companies are still going to need enough space in order to house less people. So I think we'll have, instead of having 325,000 people, we'll have 70% of that every day downtown, but I think we'll get there eventually.
Now, I do want to remind the audience that in the 10-minute reminder, as well as some of the other emails, we did send a link to a survey that CLA is requesting everybody click on that link and answer those questions. And Mike, what do you plan to do with that data? And is that something that you'll be sharing?
Yes, absolutely. Right. So our effort to get people back into the loop, we think we need to tell an accurate story of what's happening. And I was remiss when I talked a little bit about data. We do collect this, what we consider to be hard data, measures of pedestrian traffic, parking volumes, et cetera. But what we also have is what I call an attitudinal survey. So the survey that you just ask your members to take, ask the question, when do you think you will feel comfortable coming back to your office? Are you going to reopen your office? Are you going to make your employees come back? Or are you going to, are you going to allow them to work from home? What are your favorite days to work downtown? Certainly how we work is going to be different. Right now, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, not surprisingly, are the most populated days downtown. Mondays and Fridays, people, are working from home. Totally get that. That makes perfect sense to me. And I think organizations where before it was, as an executive, you kind of raised an eyebrow if somebody wanted to work from home. Now it's not a big deal. I have found our staff to be remarkably efficient and effective working from home. A little surprised, frankly, not because of them, just because of the way, these things, you thought these things go. And so I think there'll be less employees downtown, probably to about 70% of what we have now.
So, Mike, as you know, our stakeholders are both Chicago-centric as well as from the mega region, defined as the Milwaukee, Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana corridor. For particularly those viewers that may be out of state, can you help us understand what's really happening downtown? I mean, if we've heard that the streets are pretty empty, I mean, what would somebody find if they, were downtown right now today?
Well, I think if you came downtown right now, you'd be surprised at how many people are on State Street. Downtown is a very walkable place. There are, over 30,000 people living in the Loop. There's 180,000 living across the river. They have to go someplace. And so downtown is actually fairly vital. On the weekends, it's more vital, but in places where maybe it wasn't before. So maybe there's less shoppers on State Street or North Michigan Avenue, but there's a lot of people on the Riverwalk, and there's a lot of people on the lakefront. And so people are using downtown in a different way, in a way that makes them feel safe. So it's incumbent on us to find ways, to find spaces in the Loop where people can do that. That might be a little bit closer to our businesses.
And like, can you give us an idea of some of the work and initiatives that maybe you thought you would be working on in 2020 that had to be, kind of put to the back burner?
Well, that would be most of our agenda, frankly. We had a alley activation program that would attract 2,000 people on a Thursday night for 5 hours, someplace in the Loop. And of course, we can't have those kind of events anymore. And so we're struggling to figure out how do you do placemaking? Because downtowns are all about bringing people together, and that is sort of opposite of what COVID-19 is all about and what public health recommendations are. And so that's been a struggle. We were going to do it, what we're referring to as an Elevate State plan, $150,000 study on the future of State Street from a retail, university, theater, arts and entertainment perspective. And it's hard to get people to focus on what's going on at all. I mean, nobody really knew what was going on with retail before COVID. It's only gotten more problematic. So we've put that on ice until early next year.
And you talked about the different phases that you, as an organization, you have gone through. Can you help us understand from your board perspective or members that are really active, how have they engaged throughout these different phases? And what are you hearing now in terms of where they are most optimistic and where they feel most nervous?
Well, everybody's very nervous. The second round of looting did us no favors on State Street. And I think maybe more importantly, really played with the psyche of investors, property owners, and businesses, and just the citizens of Chicago. And, can the place truly be safe again? I would argue that downtown, the Loop was, more safe than most neighborhoods leading up to COVID. It has been a challenge, not so much because of the violence associated with some of the protests, but the fact that there's nobody here. And there's nobody doing sort of the right thing. There's not 2,000 people coming out of a theater at 10 o'clock at night and then mingling their way up and down State Street. That kind of activity makes State Street feel safe, vital, and alive. It's that piece that's really missing. And so people tend to zero in on the violence that's occurred, but it's really that there's just not a lot of people downtown. And where downtown and where people work used to be an advantage, now it's a bit of a liability because people live now where they work. And they're in the neighborhoods. And so it's incumbent on CLA and others to try to figure out how to attract people back to the loop in a safe and healthy way. Not easy.
And Mike, given the work that you have done with the International Downtown Association, what are you hearing from your counterparts in other cities around the world?
Well, Paris is, who's one of our close partners, they're about 4 weeks ahead of us in terms of when they reopened, and they've had some significant problems. So this notion of reopening too quickly, that's a real deal. But on the other hand, they're a little bit more innovative. So in Paris, when they reopened, the transit company, somebody decided that these people will go to work at 6 a.m., these people will go at 7 a.m. And so there was these staggered starts. So I think CTA is a very weak link in our efforts to get people to come back downtown. It's one of the things people have to get over, public transit, in order to come downtown. And we would love to see the CTA be more proactive in how they manage that and realize that their future depends on the loop's future. One of the interesting things about this whole COVID is just how connected everybody is. And I used to talk to property owners with office buildings who would, kind of rag on their first floor tenants. They're not paying enough money or whatever. Well, the building's not half as attractive if there's like dead space on the first floor, if there's not a nice restaurant. At the same time, the restaurant doesn't work if the office building isn't filled with at least some people. And so we've all become much more connected. And I think those connections might provide a way to kind of think about the new loop.
We have a question that's connected to your mobility statement, and it reads, with the number of people driving downtown, I worry about congestion and curb management. Micro mobility has also created mobility challenges, especially for individuals with disabilities. Are you thinking about complete streets and the navigability of downtown?
Yeah, we are actually. We were slow to request the notion of shared streets on behalf of our restaurants because we just don't have enough density on a particular street to begin to do that. But from a mobility standpoint, one of the data points that we know is that I don't know. Have you all heard like traffic reports like in the morning? And I'm like wondering, why are there traffic reports? There's no rush hour. Nobody's coming downtown. But what they said was that 88% of the traffic volume in the neighborhoods is happening, but downtown it's only 65%. So a lot of people came in public transit. A lot of them don't want to do that. And so there are cars downtown. I'm not that concerned about potential new congestion. In other communities, they are banning the car in certain places. These tend to be a little bit smaller downtowns, but you ask what other downtowns are doing. They're taking this as an advantage to move the car off of the streets and open them up for more micro mobility for the disabled, for folks that, have challenges associated with getting to the office.
Do you know which city is doing that?
Oh, I knew you were gonna ask me that. I think Austin is doing some of that, and Nashville's doing some of that, and a couple of others. We are approaching the CDOT commissioner to talk about the idea of shared streets. There's only 65% of the traffic volume now. It seems to me that there's opportunities here for us to save some other part of downtown, maybe restaurants.
So Micah, I'm going to share another audience question, and it reads, will there be a permanent reduction in office space needs if employers allow more staff to work from home or transition to a hybrid arrangement requiring less office space? Some staff may work on Monday and Fridays in the office, and some may work Tuesday through Thursday, thus sharing office space.
Yes, I think that will happen, but I think that will happen over time. Remember, people all have, in terms of the economics of it, people all have leases. Some of those leases might be expiring soon. Others might be for another. We just signed one, it's for 14 years. So, we're not really going anywhere in terms of less space, the economics of it. But I think where some of the pressure of the changes will be is these proposed developments outside of downtown. They were things that we were a little worried about, the Sterling Bays and those other developments just on the edge of downtown, sort of taking advantage to the proximity, but not being part of downtown. I'm not sure how those work anymore in a COVID world. And so I think there will continue to be demand for people to be in Chicago and do business in Chicago. And while there will be a deflation in the amount of people that are actually in the office every day because they have the opportunity to work from home, I think over time, downtown will still continue to attract people, and we'll refill those buildings slower, but we'll refill those buildings. I mean, if you think back to the economic crisis back in 2018, I mean, everybody, oh my God, it was like the end of the civilization. And, it didn't take that long to kind of come back.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a vaccine, I know it's a big if, but if there's a vaccine, I don't know why the economy wouldn't come back like pretty fast, because there was really no reason for it to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, when you talk about bringing the loop back and some of the initiatives during the slide presentation, I think it would be helpful for the audience to get maybe a refresher in what you said in terms of what you're actually doing to help revitalize the loop.
Right. So we are a economic development organization, small e, small d. We don't have incentives. We don't have we don't own property. We can't own property. We don't do those kind of things. But what we can do is to beat people's expectation. So when they're thinking about coming downtown, they should have no problem. They should not feel uncomfortable. They should not be accosted. They should feel like they're in a clean, healthy place. That's what we can deliver. And at the same time, encouraging people and reminding them that this is their downtown. I mean, this is, in many ways, this is where Chicago plays. And we want that to continue, and we need their support in order to do that.
Mike, there's obviously differences between the Chicago Loop Alliance and the Chicago Central Area Committee. And over the last few years, CCAC has adopted more of what we call a central city, perspective, and we're doing work in the neighborhoods. Again, for those audience members that may not be very familiar with CLA, can you explain what an SSA is?
Sure.
And
sure.
What your boundaries are?
Sure. So a special service area is a creation of the city of Chicago. It came out after they returned State Street from the bus mall to the street that we see today. And when that was done, there was this sort of scratching of the head. How are we going to pay to maintain that? And so they enacted some state legislation which enables the property owners around that asset to agree to tax themselves and generate revenue. So this year, the 40 properties up and down State Street from Wacker to Ida B. Wells generate about $3 million. There are 55 groups like ours across the city. We are the largest. Some of them out in the neighborhoods, commercial districts are very small. If you're driving around or riding your bike or even on a scooter, and you look up and you see banners that say SSA and a number, you're in an SSA. So those property owners agree to contribute money to pay for services above and beyond what the city provides. In our case, it's clean, safe, fun, and promotion for the most part.
Excellent. And you've mentioned State Street a number of times, but I know from our previous conversations, there's also been interest in Wabash and, doing some arts and better lighting. Can you maybe speak to that?
Sure. So we have they're a bit more informal, but we have the Wabash District group, and we have the Cultural Mile group that we administer. We haven't been meeting much this year, but there's people very interested from the river down to Roosevelt on both Wabash and Michigan Avenue to do things like we're doing on State Street. Nobody's stepping up to pay for an SSA and the funding that would be available with that. But people recognize that some collective action is going to be necessary in order to survive.
So Mike, we just have another minute or so left. So for those members that are watching this webinar and if they want to get involved, how do they get involved with you?
So if you go to www.loopchicago.com, loopchicago.com, that would be kind of the best way to at least see who we are and the kind of work that we do. We'd very much love for people to take that survey on a consistent basis through the next 3 to 6 months. It would be extremely helpful for us to understand what they're hoping to do with their businesses or their organizations. Excuse me. And we are somewhat like you. Our geography is much smaller, but we like to think of ourselves as planners and looking forward. And so we have lots of people that are interested, that have an urban sensibility, love the loop, and love to talk about the loop. Over drinks, better, but it doesn't really matter. They'll talk about the loop wherever they are. And we'd love to get together and get our groups together.
Terrific. Well, I see that it's 2 o'clock. The 30 minutes always goes so quickly. So Mike, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing all of this really important information, helping our stakeholders understand the important work of CLA. I'd like to reinforce, please do take that survey and we can work together to make sure that those that are interested in getting the data get the data. I'd like to remind the audience that our next webinar will be tomorrow. Normally it's on Thursdays, but this week it's going to be tomorrow and the time is different. It's going to be at 2:30 p.m. Central. And we're doing it tomorrow because it's following a very important rally that's happening regarding some funding that is essential for Amtrak. And we need to make sure that our stakeholders have the information, know how to contact their congressmen and senators in order to alert Washington to the needs of our mega region. So if you're interested in Amtrak funding, if you know anybody that is, please visit the ccac.org website and register for tomorrow at 2:30. And then we're going to return next week on Tuesdays and Thursday with the one of our Alliance Board members who is an expert, a healthcare expert, who's going to be talking about whether or not the ACA will really be gutted with the new Supreme Court. So if you care about healthcare, you won't want to miss that on Tuesday. And we have Illinois State Comptroller on Thursday. So we have some great programming. We appreciate your support. I'm grateful that you're spending time with us. Stay strong, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Mike, thanks so much, and I'll talk
Thank
to you
you.
soon. Bye,
Good luck,
everybody.
everybody. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.